House when the 118th Congress opens for business this Tuesday. One of the big questions on Capitol Hill is, will GOP leader Kevin McCarthy be elected Speaker of the House despite opposition from some members in his own party? Here's what he told Maria on this program last month.
We have a close majority, exactly what the Democrats had in the last time. And we've laid out to the American public, they chose for us to be in the majority, for us to lead. We need to come together as one, otherwise we will not be successful. We've had a very successful conference last week, I felt.
Well, you won 85% of the vote, and obviously the majority wants you as Speaker, but you've got to get the 218 votes.
Yeah, the difficulty here is we've already had the primary. We've already made that decision, 85% of the conference. If people don't come along, that's going to delay our ability to secure the border. That's going to delay our ability to become energy independent. That's going to delay our ability to repeal 87,000 IRS agents. That's going to delay our ability to hold government accountable. There's no subpoena that can go out until that gets done.
Joining us now is California Republican Congressman Darrell Issa. He's a member of both the House Judiciary Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, welcome and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jackie, and thanks for covering the Speaker's race. It's so important that we get Speaker McCarthy in place and begin with a very full agenda.
Well, he has the majority, but there are still some holdout votes. Has any progress been made with respect to some concessions or some deal making behind the scenes where you think on Tuesday he could win this vote outright?
Oh, absolutely. As an old whip counter here in the Congress, he had 31 people who voted for somebody other than him in the first round. That has dwindled down to single digits, with a couple of people saying they'll never vote for him. But at the end of the day, recognizing that if 5 or 6 people hold out, all we're really doing is empowering the other side and not having a speaker, because there's no question over 200 members, Republican members, will stick with Kevin McCarthy again and again and again, and that includes Steve Scalise and the rest of the leadership team. You can't make a decision on somebody with nobody, and quite frankly, there is no alternative to Kevin. He clearly is our choice broadly, and he's earned it. He's earned it over more than a decade of incredible hard work in a leadership.
But he has been accused of cutting backdoor deals with Democrats that are not in the interest of the party. And, you know, part of the problem here is if a speaker isn't elected and the contests continue, no work can get done. Swearing in of members can't even happen.
Oh, absolutely. And let's be candid. You have two choices as a Speaker of the House. You can get 218 Republican votes, or you can get votes from the other side to get to 218. John Boehner and others discovered that. Some of them went to the Democrats. What's different about Kevin McCarthy, when he was faced with people who said, I'll never vote for you and I need all these rules changed, he stood there in front of the conference and went through item by item and helped negotiate a rules change package that was broadly endorsed, including changes that I personally wouldn't have done, that he was willing to not only do, but to support. So he's done the hard work. He has the respect of people at the chairmanship level, and people at the what we call the Elks level, the other members of leadership. He has a team in place and is ready to go. And quite frankly, there's an inevitability that he will be the Speaker. So now it's time for those few holdouts to decide what is it that they really want. Say it. We'll make sure, Speaker McCarthy will make sure they get it. But at the same time, we don't just need 218, by the way, on day one. We need 218 every single day if we're going to hold this administration accountable for not obeying the laws, not honoring the Constitution, and as you said in your segue lead-in, going after what we've discovered on Twitter is going on in social media, this alliance between government and the private sector to spy or to adversely affect political opponents.
Yeah, and you make a great point there, because the American people voted for change, and they are getting it in the House. They want the House to get to business and start looking into some of these investigations, as you mentioned, not just on big tech and censorship, but they want to know about the origins of COVID. They want to know what happened with our Afghanistan withdrawal, what's happening at the southern border, and so much more. So these holdout votes, if they continue to hold out and stall the process, I imagine there could be some backlash there.
Well, there can be, but that's not Kevin's style. Kevin's style is to keep working and essentially find ways to bring people together. And that includes a team of us who, quite frankly, are every bit as conservative and concerned about us being aggressive as those who are currently holdouts. Quite a few of the holdouts are my friends. They've worked for me when I was chairman. And candidly, people like Jim Jordan, who are supporting Speaker McCarthy, were people who pushed back against the previous Republican Speaker because he wouldn't do enough, and they're comfortable that Kevin will support a team that goes after all of the problems facing America. And, some of those problems are not just of the making of this president. The situation with Russia, the situation with China, a $10 trillion balance sheet at the Fed that has to be unwound without crushing our economy. These are all things that Kevin McCarthy has spent years putting together a team of people, chairmen and other leaders, that are going to have to do our job. Remember, Congress was formed not really to pass law. We were formed to solve problems as they came before our republic.
Congressman, I want to switch gears for a moment. We're going to get into some of the foreign policy stuff a little bit later, but let's talk about Elon Musk and the Twitter files, because he has paid $44 billion to uncover the truth. Let's just understand what it has cost him. But having said that, it's the DOJ, it's the FBI, and now possibly even the Department of Homeland Security, essentially working with a consortium of biased parties that was then working with a cybersecurity infrastructure security agency that is connected to DHS. So when you follow the dots here, you see that this is far more widespread than anticipated.
Well, absolutely, and it's interesting that it doesn't just include political appointees on the Democrat side. It includes people who transfer from administration to administration, the so-called professional bureaucrats who apparently have a political bias against Republicans, or, in my opinion, against free and fair speech. And we're seeing it because of Elon Musk. But, we know one thing. What we learn analyzing Twitter information, which is now open to us, we're going to have to then subpoena and get from Facebook, from Meta, from Google, from all these other areas where we've seen similar and sometimes even worse behavior and worse coordination with big government, because big government and big tech can in fact eliminate free speech. And now that we know it, we have to unravel it.
And I think the American people are looking for accountability, so they will be watching closely. Stay with us, Congressman Issa. When we come back, we're going to examine the
Chinese Communist Party today is here. It's in America. It's inside the gates. We have to confront it, and we have to protect the American people from the threat it presents.
That's former Secretary of State and Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo speaking with Maria last month on the threat the Chinese Communist Party poses to America here at home. Meanwhile, in the skies over the South China Sea, a Chinese military jet came within mere feet of a U.S. Air Force jet, forcing the American pilot to take evasive maneuvers to avoid a mid-air collision. This incident occurred on December 21st, according to the Defense Department. Let's welcome back Congressman Darrell Issa. Congressman, good to have you here. Let's get right into the China threat, because President Xi seems emboldened, and with the foreign policy track record of this administration, it's no surprise. We're wondering what you think about the possibility that he makes a move on Taiwan possibly this year.
Well, it's extremely, extremely possible, and it's possible because of a sign of weakness. Secretary Pompeo wasn't just the Secretary of State, he was also the CIA director for a period of time, and he was in the CIA before that. He's well aware that they look for those opportunities, and particularly when Xi is dealing with problems at home. He hasn't been able to figure out how to get his economy going again. He has, for the first time ever, real protests in the streets of mainland China. So he has a reason to look for some way to distract from local problems, and he sees a weakness that he can take advantage of, particularly after what's happened with Russia. As you know, his first trip, he and Putin are getting together to talk about mutual cooperation. That's about the worst sign we've seen since before Nixon opened up a pathway to China and split those two countries.
Yeah, President Xi is supposed to make that state visit in the spring. He's been invited to do it by Vladimir Putin. So you stand back here and you see the bad actors on the global stage essentially aligning all together. And what's really made the situation worse is the fact that the U.S. is no longer energy independent here, right? So China has been keeping the economic engine for Russia alive as it's in this war with Ukraine, that we're backing the Ukrainians and supporting them here. So how does this play out? Because this has gone on a lot longer than most people were expecting, and it's been tough. It's been tough.
It's been really tough, and if you think about it, the only oil we've exported is from our Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and China bought it. So we've done a lot to empower and to embolden our enemies and to give them the opportunity. And in the case of Russia, which you mentioned, anything we do in the way of weakness or cooperation or not working toward energy efficiency and effectiveness and exporting of natural gas actually keeps Russia in the fight longer, because they have to fund their war, and they have to fund it more and more by buying things in the way of weapons. You know, they're getting drones, not internally, but they're getting them from China and Iran.
Can we go back to China for a moment with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic? Because it's almost 3 years of the anniversary of when COVID broke out. And now you see the Chinese government locking down its people, and there are reports that new variants are emerging in China. Now, this administration did not ask for any accountability about the origins of COVID. I believe that's something that the House will do come Tuesday and moving forward. But having said that, how can we expect them to do the right thing here? Because there has been no transparency.
There's been not only been no transparency, but for the first time, we're recognizing that people coming from China, on visas, are in fact a special threat and need to be tested. And they're a special threat because they don't honestly report their cases. If there is a new variant, we won't know about it till after it jumps over to here, the same as it did to Italy in the very beginning of this. So we've got to hold them as, if you will, trust but verify. In this case, we have reason not to trust them and to verify every single visitor coming here, and to assume that new variants are likely to come from this country without an explanation.
California Congressman Darrell Issa, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Great to see you, and Happy New Year again.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay.
Happy New Year.
As we ring in the new...
Reining in some of that debt.
Well, if you look at what the Fed's doing, that's really, there are limited tools in the toolbox. It's mostly interest rates. And if they're a hammer, everything that they see is a nail, and they're going to try to raise interest rates to tamp down the demand. But that's not really the problem. We want demand in this country. The problem is Joe Biden and his policies over the last 2 years have choked down supply. We got to deal with the goods. We got to deal with American energy and getting back to energy independence again. We've got to get back to rolling back regulations, which have stopped housing projects. It's stopped building apartments. It's made it hard on small businesses trying to meet the demand of the consumers out there.
That's North Carolina Senator-elect Ted Budd speaking with Maria on how President Biden's tax and spend economic policies have left Americans vulnerable to red-hot inflation not seen in 40 years. The latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that wages have not been able to keep up with inflation, resulting in less buying power for consumers on basic necessities like food and shelter. On Friday, the S&P 500 finished the year down 19%. It is worst showing since the financial crisis of 2008. Meanwhile, the national debt is currently at $31.4 trillion and continues to climb. The interest on the debt alone over $500 billion. Joining us now, the turmoil that Americans are dealing with to talk about it more is Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stile, who sits on the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, it's great to have you. Happy New Year to you, and welcome back to the show. Let's talk about the economy going into 2023. The expectation from bank CEOs and economists is that we will be in recession. How deep is the question? You look at some of these numbers and the fact that the Fed is going to continue to raise rates. The Fed is not going to stop and then lower rates as we previously thought. The cost to service our national debt, the cost for companies to service their debt, that creates a spiral situation where you start to see layoffs and you start to see the economy slow. That hurts the American people. And this is a result of inflation never seen before like this, 7.1% under this administration. Your thoughts, sir?
Are in challenging times, and it's the double whammy of the monetary policy and the fiscal policy coming out of Washington. The monetary policy, though, passed under 2 years of Democratic one-party control, is the driver of all of this. The Fed is simply reacting to the fact that trillions and trillions of new spending has come out of Washington over the course of the last 2 years. And so it's all the more imperative that when Republicans come in 2 days and take away the Speaker's gavel from Nancy Pelosi, that we address the runaway spending here in Washington to allow inflation to come down so families can afford the things that they need.
Yeah, and of course, this $1.7 trillion omnibus bill has added to the tab, and so there's going to be a lot to fix in 2023. The Fed can't necessarily do it alone. The spending does have to be reined in. Senator-elect Ted Budd made a very good point there about what's happening here. Demand is a good thing for the country, but we haven't fixed the underlying problems that will help with inflation. One of those is the energy crisis. We are not energy independent anymore, but also the supply chain issues as well. When I look at these numbers and how they've trended, I don't see inflation moving that much lower until some of the underlying issues are solved.
I'm afraid that that's incredibly accurate. What we saw was administration push a story that inflation was temporary and transitory. It was anything but. And the reason is because there's horrible policies that have come forward over the course of the last 2 years here in Washington, D.C. Not only the spending, but also the attacks on energy that we've seen under the Biden administration. We got to remember, on day one, the Biden administration killed the Keystone XL pipeline. They've continued a war on energy to this day. And what we haven't seen is a shift in tone from this administration. Sure, they'll go to Saudi Arabia and beg for oil. They'll talk with Venezuela. But what we need to do is unleash American energy. And if we do that, we can bring prices down here at home.
Yeah, and high oil and gas prices, high prices to heat your home this winter. People are really suffering as a result of that. When the Fed raises rates to combat the inflation, they want to get from 7.1% to 2%. They've got a long way to go there. The cost of everything goes up. The cost of trying to get a mortgage, the cost of trying to buy a new car. Jerome Powell essentially broadcast to us as he raises rates, people have to lose their jobs. And it's not even that. We're also seeing the health of the American consumer deteriorate a little bit. Credit card debt is up from $650 on average from this time last year to $5,650. People are using credit cards to bridge the gap for their basic expenses.
Yeah, items are becoming more and more expensive for families, and people are looking for ways to pay for this. And one of the big challenges is that we've seen is wages aren't keeping up with inflation. So every month that goes by, American families feel themselves falling further and further behind. And again, the Federal Reserve is raising rates to try to hit the brakes on the freight train that is your government in Washington, D.C., spending your money and driving us further into debt. And the further that the Democrats have spent us into the oblivion, the harder the brakes are that are going to be pulled by the Federal Reserve. And so we need to dramatically change course. The good news is there's a real opportunity here when we take away the Speaker's gavel from Nancy Pelosi to stop these spending boondoggles that have come out of Washington, D.C. time and time again over the last 2 years.
Yeah, and a lot of the concern is with this job loss that we will see in 2023. If you cull the headlines together, you'll see a lot of it so far has been in the technology sector. And of course, the NASDAQ was the worst hit in index this year. It was down 33%. That's technology. Having said that, other sectors are going to have to lay employees off as well. President Biden came into office, and when he destroyed the energy industry in this country, he said that green energy jobs jobs were going to be available. Where are they, Congressman?
Well, what we've seen this administration do is drive forward a radical Green New Deal agenda, and the results are American families paying more to fill up their car with gas, but also to heat their home and now to buy groceries, because often it's a diesel tractor that's in the field harvesting. It's a diesel truck that's bringing those goods to your grocery store. And so it takes a long time for these types of jobs to come online. What we don't need is Washington picking winners and losers. What we need to do is unleash American energy, and we need to get the spending under control, because I'm very concerned, as you said, that the Federal Reserve is going to hit the brakes even harder, and that's a draconian impact for the American families.
Yeah, and it has an impact on the middle class, and those are the very people this president said that he was going to try to help. So we will see how this plays out the rest of the year. We so appreciate your time today, Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, the Supreme Court puts the brakes on the Biden administration lifting Title 42 for now. So what impact will it have on the continuing humanitarian crisis at the southern border? Texas Congresswoman-elect Monica De La Cruz will join us to give a first-hand account on what's happening in her border districts.
You mentioned the cartels. Are they making $300 million at least a week, as I was told a couple of years ago, just on human smuggling? I mean, they are getting rich, and they are the ones that are deciding who comes in and who doesn't into America.
Yeah, the profits are absolutely staggering, what we're seeing right now. When we seize $97 million of drugs in 48 hours, that shows you how bad it is. And then on top of that, if you count how much the migrants are paying, if you're from Central America, you're paying $6,000 to get into the United States. If you're coming from China, if you're coming from countries that are not contingent to our continent, then you're paying upwards of $35,000. These cartels, the profits are staggering.
That's National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judge, along with Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, on the control and influence the Mexican cartels have over the United States southern border. Customs and Border Protection sources tell Fox News that as of Thursday, over 430,000 migrants already have been released for this fiscal year, which started in October, with an additional 240,000 migrants listed as gotaways. That is on top of the over 5 million migrants who already crossed the border illegally under President Biden's watch. Joining us now is Texas Congresswoman-elect Monica De La Cruz, who will be sworn in this Tuesday. Congresswoman-elect, Happy New Year to you and welcome. Great to see you this morning.
Yes, Happy New Year to you as well.
Can we talk about the crisis at the southern border, what you're seeing, what your constituents are asking for, what you'll try to do in Washington, because this administration has completely turned a blind eye to a massive problem?
Absolutely. Look, the Biden administration has paid no attention to our borders, especially down here in South Texas. In fact, he has not been to our southern border once. However, he's been to Delaware 59 times. So the burden of protecting our borders falls on our local communities, falls on our local sheriff's department. You know, I was just talking to a rancher yesterday, and what he said is that not only does he have property damage, but they're finding small children abandoned on their ranch lands, dead bodies in front of their homes. This is a complete catastrophe, not only on the American side, but the immigrants, humanitarian crisis as well.
Yeah, there's that aspect of it, of course. And there's also a crime aspect to it as well. A Texas ranch owner near the border caught a man that was attempting to break into his home. This is the kind of story that we've heard over and over again. Not everybody coming into the country illegally is a criminal, but some people are, and they're disrupting communities and now being dispersed across the country. So this is not just a border state problem.
No, it's not just a border state problem. And the thing is that we don't know what their intentions are. That's the biggest problem. Yes, there are people coming over here who want a better life, but there are people who are coming who also want to hurt our American life as well. The Biden administration needs to have a plan. They need to reinstate the Remain in Mexico. They need to stop the catch and release program and work with countries countries in South America where people can go seek asylum in those countries. But the Biden administration has no plan.
And of course, the cartels are making hundreds of millions of dollars, bringing fentanyl into this country as well, while people here are dying. And this is not just a border issue with the cartels. It also brings China into the equation because that's where the fentanyl is coming from.
Look, I'm a single mom of 2 children, and it breaks my heart to know that there are mothers and fathers that are spending the holidays without their kids due to a fentanyl overdose. Just this year, the Rio Grande Valley sector seized its largest liquid fentanyl in history, 3 gallons, which could kill 5 million people. The numbers are just staggering and unacceptable. Again, with the Biden's open border policy, he's allowing these drugs to come in and kill our children.
Yeah, and there were pictures of $100 million bust of liquid meth, I believe it was, in Clorox bottles coming across the border, too. It's not just fentanyl, but I want to go over what we've seen here statistically in our country. Overdose deaths in 2021, 106,699 fentanyl overdose deaths are up 22%. Congresswoman-elect, and fentanyl seized at the southern border for the 2022 fiscal year, 14,104 pounds. It's a massive amount.
The numbers are staggering, and this is where I hope that the American people will wake up and vote differently in 2024 to change the White House, who right now does not care about our southern border or our national security. This must change.
And with the GOP having control of the House, what can you do in Washington this year?
Well, I'm excited about voting for Leader McCarthy to be our Speaker of the House. And he has made a commitment to stop the 87,000 IRS agent positions that the Biden administration wants to open up and instead put 87,000 Border Patrol agents, feet on the ground. That is what we need. When I get sworn in, I want to get Border Patrol agents the resources that they need. Resources such as working drones, working night vision goggles, working vehicles. These are things that our Border Patrol agents should have. And what the Biden administration has done with their lack of support is caused a mental health crisis with our Border Patrol agents, where we have had the highest number of Border Patrol and Custom agents commit suicide. This is an epidemic, and we must get them help now.
Yeah, I hear you. And also, of course, we have funneled money down to the border to help with processing illegal migrants into the country versus working on actual deterrence. We are going to have to leave it there. Texas Congresswoman-elect Monica De La Cruz, thank you so much for joining us, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We could let the criminals out in those neighborhoods of those people who claim that no cash bail is racist. They would understand, because their homes would be broken into, their businesses would be broken into. Ultimately, they talked about defunding the police, and so it demoralized our law enforcement, and so many of them have left the profession.
That's Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears speaking with Maria last summer on the impact bail reform has had on law enforcement's ability to fight crime across this country. Last night, a 19-year-old man with a machete wounded 2 New York City police officers just blocks from the New Year's Eve celebration in Times Square. The FBI, NYPD, and Joint Terrorism Task Force are investigating. Police sources tell Fox that the suspect was on the Fed's counter-terror radar for weeks. Meanwhile, in Mobile, Alabama, 1 person is dead, at least 9 others hurt in a shooting at the city's New Year's Eve event. Major cities across the country have seen crime rise, and analysts say it's because of factors including police officers quitting over a lack of support and soft-on-crime prosecutors. But Florida has taken a different approach to combating crime, recruiting law enforcement officers across the nation to come and work and live in the Sunshine State. Florida's Be a Hero program offers incentives, including a one-time bonus of up to $5,000. So far, the state has awarded that bonus to over 600 police officers. Joining us now with more is Florida's Attorney General Ashley Moody. AG Moody, Happy New Year, and thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Florida, because so many people have moved there during the pandemic and after as well. Crime has been a #1 issue in many of these cities across the country. What are you doing to make Florida safe, and why are people flocking there?
Well, Happy New Year. And yes, you've seen the recent news that shows more people are moving into Florida from other states than anywhere in the country. We're glad to see that our recruitment of police officers, those individuals that have signed up for these incredibly dangerous and noble profession, are moving here. And, you know, compare that to New York, where they had 4,000 cops walk off the job. And I think that was a huge increase from even the year prior. And we're seeing them move to the Sunshine State. I've attended swearing-in ceremonies where they say, we're just glad to be in a state where leadership has our backs. They openly, vocally, proudly support law enforcement. Not only that, we're helping them buy homes. We're helping them live in the communities they serve, giving them bonuses, giving our first responders raises. Compare that to other parts of this country where you are seeing, wow, there's a drastic violent crime increase. Take Chicago, for example. Last year, they had a 40% increase in violent crime. And how does that governor respond? Totally revamping their pretrial release and bail program, saying that he's doing it for equity reasons.
Right.
Now, mind you, these folks, Biden and progressive radical Democrats, have hijacked that term. It doesn't mean equality or equal treatment under the law. When they say equity, people should start looking at their communities and thinking about getting out. When they say that, they mean we are going to implement woke, wackadoo, weak policies that will wreck the prosperity and safety of your community.
And that's the thing, right? When it comes to crime and it comes to the criminal justice system, Democrats will say the only way to cure the injustices in the system are to use tools like no cash bail, cashless bail. But having said that, there's got to be a better way to institute reform. And it seems like that's what you're working on in Florida, to try to empower the police, raise them up, train them better. You know, of course, there are mistakes that happen in any system, and we can work on those things, but taking the money away doesn't necessarily help fix the problem. It certainly leaves the rest of the citizens at risk.
Florida is not immune to the forces that the rest of the nation is facing. You know, but what you have to remember as leaders in an executive branch, that you have to confront those issues head on. You can't be like President Biden. That would be a great start, but you have to confront these things head on. Governor DeSantis does a great job. In fact, when we were seeing an overwhelming onslaught of retail theft, we came in, we passed laws making it easier to prosecute this organized crime rings committing retail theft. We instituted new technology to help us get a better handle on that. So in Florida, you know, the motto here is, if there is an issue, we tackle it head on. We're not going to run away from challenges. And I think if the rest of the nation did that in an intellectually honest way, we can improve our bail system. We can make sure people aren't sitting in jail just because they can't afford bail. But you can't do what Illinois is doing and saying, you know, totally tying the judge's hands on who can be considered a flight risk, saying it's not violation if you're on house arrest and you leave for 48 hours, just enough time to commit another drug crime or another crime. I mean, it's insane policies. So if you do these things in an intellectually honest way and you're forceful in meeting these challenges head on, you can make progress. Your citizens will feel safe. And law enforcement, heck, they'll want to be and live in your state.
And AG Moody, you've brought crime down in Florida to a 50-year low. I just want to reiterate that. We are going to have more with Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody.